You're watching Cricket World TV Hotspot with me, John Pennington, and once again, as we look back on the latest county cricket action, it's time to give a warm welcome to Matt Carter. Hello, Matt.
Good morning. How are we?
I'm very, very well, thank you very much. On the cast today, then we're going to have a look at the latest LV County Championship action. 6 games there were this week, Division 1 and Division 2, everything getting very exciting towards the end of the season. And we're also going to have a look at the T20 Blast as well, just to update you with where we are with that. Matt, let's start with LV County Championship Division 1. 3 games this week, but would you say Yorkshire or Nottinghamshire were the major winners this week?
Probably Nottinghamshire. You'd have to say it's a little bit similar to last week when Yorkshire were the benefactors of the rest failing to win. This week it was Nottinghamshire who have seen their lead at the top of the table. I think it's only been Yorkshire have only gone top by 5 points. I mean, Nottinghamshire might have been concerned that if a Yorkshire win over Durham, and they will be playing catch up, and even had Somerset and Middlesex forced that result in their game. But it's strange. I mean, nobody really seems to have the ability to really force their way through the field and make a telling contribution and actually get themselves free from the pack. So what it's looking like, it's going to be going all the way down to the wire. I mean, Yorkshire were nearly there this week. They got within 2 wickets of beating Durham, but it's tough for Yorkshire. They haven't put together back-to-back wins all season. That is the one thing that's really held them back. If they manage to do that and give yourself a bit of a cushion, but they just can't seem to break away. But they are still top, and I suppose if you'd offered that position now, then they would have most definitely have taken it.
Absolutely. You talked there about Middlesex and Somerset not getting a result from their game. Do you think that might be it now for perhaps Middlesex and even Somerset as well, though, given that Somerset do have to play Northants twice and they're playing there at the moment? Where do you see that as hampering their chances?
Yeah, Middlesex have really started to go off the boil, unfortunately. I mean, they were top of the table after 6 games. They'd won 4. They haven't won since, so they're winless in 5. They really needed to take a bit more of a risk in this game. I mean, the pitch was flat, and it is perhaps harsh to criticise Chris Rogers for trying to force a declaration on a pitch as flat as the one they were playing on, but they needed something to reignite their season, and it probably comes back to the result last week where they gave Northamptonshire too much respect, really, for a side who have been pretty despondent. I mean, this week Northamptonshire slipped to new lows at Sussex, and that Chris Rogers really had to take the gamble if they were going to do it, but they're probably not playing well enough either to actually force a championship challenge. They're not taking wickets as they were at the start of the season. Steve Finn and Tim Murtagh aren't the same threat on pitches that aren't providing the same level as assistance. As for Somerset, they still have a glimmer, actually. Somerset, as you say, they started playing Northamptonshire yesterday. They put on a decent 360 for 9, I think, so the game's moving fairly quickly there. Monk Trescott got 100, and obviously they play Northants again, and they do meet Yorkshire as well on the last day of the season. I think of the 5 games, if they can win 3 of those, then you never know. There's not been a massive amount of wins this season. Then 3 wins in those games, then they've still got a chance, but unfortunately, it looked like they're going to be without Craig Kieswetter, who suffered a nasty injury yesterday, so that's going to hamper them. But certainly, Somerset is not all over. I mean, they could have done with a result in that game against Middlesex, as they could have done against Lancashire last week, but still plenty for them to play for, I'd say.
And just before we move on to Division 2 quickly, Matt, would you say it's realistically it's going to be one of Yorkshire, Nottinghamshire or Warwickshire this year?
I think so, yeah. I mean, if you're going to, I'd probably say Yorkshire or Nottinghamshire. I mean, Warwickshire is still in there. It was a decent week for them, really. Everything aligned how they wanted to. I mean, before last week, Warwickshire were looking like they were just meandering to mid-table, and then they beat Notts. It's whether they've got enough to really put together back-to-back wins, which I think Warwickshire will need to do if they're going to win the title. And their batting is a little bit limited, but I think Yorkshire and Nottinghamshire for me are probably the 2 that it's going to be between. But we'll have to see how it goes. I mean, the weather will probably be a deciding factor come those weeks in September. Obviously, we've got a little bit of a break coming up as well in a fortnight, which will be interesting how teams come off the back of that break.
Yeah, that's right. They'll go off and play a lot of one-day cricket, so we'll see how they go there. Into Division 2, and are we beginning to see a little bit of a potential here for a 3-way title battle, do you think, or a 3-way battle for the 2 promotion spots?
Well, I mean, Surrey are certainly making the top two a little bit nervous now. I mean, it looked like they were just going to cruise into the top flight. They were completely been offered no pressure from anyone. Nobody could string back-to-back wins together. And then Surrey are suddenly flying. I mean, since Gary Wilson took over the captaincy from that Graham Smith injury, which was really meant to be that for Surrey, that was the end of their campaign. But I don't know whether they're starting to come to terms with Graham Ford's methods, but they're looking in very good nick, Surrey. I mean, they've got all the momentum with them. The young players are really mixing well with the experienced heads. They had a very impressive win over Glamorgan this week, who have had a fairly decent season themselves, Glamorgan, but you look at them, Surrey, and the confidence is soaring, and they look a dangerous side now, and I think Hampshire have just started to stutter a little bit. I mean, they're still unbeaten, so it's hard to say they're having a real lull, because you're probably going to have the odd game where you're not firing at 100%, and then they got away with a game against Gloucestershire with a draw, which they'll probably consider a decent return, but I think with Hampshire, they've got a few players who are out of form now. Michael Carberry's not getting a lot of runs. They were very reliant on James Vince's runs earlier on. He's still batting well, Vince, but not the same remarkable level as he was. And they are without Kyle Abbott, who is now off to play Test cricket for South Africa. Worcestershire, I think, are the ones that everyone's expecting to fall away, but they play Leicestershire this week with Syed Ajmal's last game, I think it is. If they can win that one, Worcestershire, then I think that might be enough. And Hampshire similarly have a game against Essex this week, and Surrey aren't playing this week, so but both of them have a chance to really rebuild the cushion that Surrey have been eating into. But certainly it's going to get a little bit touchy if Surrey can continue to mount the challenge they are doing at the minute.
Certainly is, and I got my sums a bit wrong earlier on. I said there were 6 games, there were in fact 7, of course, 4 games in all in the Division 2. Any other real major talking points from Division 2 this week, Matt?
I think you've got to give Nick Brown a mention at Essex. I mean, he scored a century, an unbeaten century in both innings as against Derbyshire at Chesterfield. So he was on the field for every single ball of that match. He'd never scored a century before that, so you've got to take your hat off to him. That was a curious game. I mean, Derbyshire, another side who put together a rather bizarre declaration, considering their second bottom, they've got nothing to play for. That was interesting, and a bit of a poor end to an excellent game at Chesterfield. And probably finally Leicestershire, again, it was another frustrating week for them. They set Kent 300. They thought they had a chance to finally get that win. I think it's something like 668 days since they won a game of 4-day cricket, which is pretty remarkable stuff. And it's looking like they may go another season without winning, and they've got a whole plethora of players out of contract, and there's very little for them to get excited about. But that was Kent's first back-to-back win since 2012, so they perhaps are on the up, but it's hard to judge when your back-to-back wins are against Derbyshire and Leicestershire. It doesn't really give you a great indication of where you're at, to be honest.
No, I don't think they had a great week in the 2020 stuff either, did they? Brown, obviously a name to look out for in the future. We'll be sort of monitoring his progress very closely. Onto the T20 Blast, Matt, just give us an update of where we are with those competitions. We're coming towards the end of the group stage, and of course a little bit of it earlier this week. I've been very impressed with Essex, particularly.
Yeah, we're getting very much into the business end of things now, and as you say, I think Essex have won 9 in 10, and they're absolutely flying. And I think they've chased about 8 successful chases. I mean, against Kent this week, they were asked to bat first, but they look a phenomenal side, especially with the bat. Every time, whatever you set them, they're just reaching with ease. And they're probably you'd say, along with Lancashire, currently the favourites to win the tournament. I mean, they're the 2 sides who have qualified for the knockout stages. And things are getting in the North Division. Things are getting a little bit more compact suddenly. It looked like Worcestershire and Lancashire were going to go through. Notts probably as well, but suddenly I think there's 3 or 4 points separating between 2nd and 6th. It's all got a bit congested. I mean, Worcestershire's 2020 campaign's been remarkable, really. They lost the first 2, won the next 6, and now they've lost the next 2. So it seems to happen in chunks. Then they suddenly need a win to get themselves back on track. I mean, Yorkshire can go second today in that group if they were to beat Derbyshire at Chesterfield, which, weather dependent, they probably will. But it's very competitive now in that one. You've got Yorkshire in there. Northampton are just about clinging on to their survival hopes. They won a couple of games recently and got out of jail with a draw at Leicestershire when they looked like they were going to be beat. The North Division is a little bit more clear-cut. I think it's probably going to be from discarding Essex, who are going to be there. I think it's going to be 3 from 4 who are going to take that final spot. With, as you say, Kent's chances were probably terminally damaged this week, and think it's probably going to be 3 out of Somerset, Glamorgan, Hampshire, and Surrey. And Hampshire have lost 2 in 2, which is quite surprising. But certainly plenty of intrigue entering these closing weeks. There's going to be plenty of calculators out as well, trying to figure out who is going to nick those final spots.
Absolutely, and it's obviously great for the tournament that we have, at this stage. Still so much up in the air, a really good contest. So let's hope that continues. And this week then, Matt, we've got obviously get this one right. We've got 6 county championship fixtures, a lot of 2020 Blast games as well as of course the second test in England and India getting underway. Where would you be heading off to this week, Matt, if money and transport and weather was no object?
I think the most intriguing game in the Championship is probably at Liverpool, where Lancashire are playing Nottinghamshire. You'd imagine at Liverpool you're going to get a wicket that's going to generate a result, and Lancashire are really in dire need of a result. They haven't beaten anyone outside Northamptonshire, and if they're going to stay up, they're probably going to need 2 wins from their last 5. You imagine looking at the table with Sussex having beaten Northamptonshire this week, so that's going to be one to keep an eye on. I'd imagine they're going to prepare a wicket that's going to have a bit of spice in it. So, and then for Northamptonshire, Yorkshire aren't in action, so they have a chance to perhaps put some pressure on Yorkshire. And the other game in Division 1, Warwickshire and Durham, Warwickshire really need a win in that one to keep alive their Championship hopes. But certainly, I think that game at Liverpool will be the most intriguing this week.
And any 2020 games that catch your eye?
I can't say I've seen the fixtures, to be honest. Yeah, not done my homework there.
Right, not a problem. There's plenty of games. I'm sure you could almost pick one out of a hat and be guaranteed some entertainment. It really has been an interesting season so far. So on that note, Matt, I shall leave you to report to the headmaster's study and come back next week with your findings.
Yeah, I'll head to detention then.
Great stuff. Thanks for your time, Matt. We'll catch up next week.
Thanks very much. See ya.
And thanks very much for watching us here on Cricket World TV.